The next part of my a priori series is on things and not things. It's kind of an odd way of thinking about things and not things. In the Old Testament, for instance, you had food and not food. So you had clean animals and unclean animals. And the unclean animals were fine. You just weren't supposed to eat them. That's all. So Elijah was in the ravine and the crows, and he was out of food and he was hungry and he didn't have any water. So God caused a spring to show up and give him pure drinking water. People pay big money for spring water these days. It was a kind of a luxury. And then at the same time, God sent crows with strips of meat. So he was on the meat and water diet there. So it would seem kind of odd because the crows are unclean. You can't eat them. But he wasn't eating the crows, he was eating the meat. The meat was fine. So you had food you could eat and food you can't eat. And the food that you can't eat wasn't food. You could eat it. Biologically, you could eat it. Probably be just fine. I'm sure you could cook up a crow. A lot of people have been forced to feel like they've had to eat some crow after they've had to admit to a failure of some sort. But it wasn't food. So in the Christian sense also too, there's lots of other things that aren't food. For instance, you're not supposed to be dwelling and ruminating in desires for revenge uh, or lust or other kinds of things like that. Which brings us next thing. You have love and lust. Lust is not love. Love is love. In love, you put the other person's best interests forward. You recognize they're just as good as you, and they're actually more important than you. And the more you love them, the more important you make them over yourself. And lust is ultimately about yourself and getting what you want out of somebody. Uh, Love is about making a contribution. So a guy goes to church and he talks to his priest. And he says, "Well, I was sleeping with Gertrude the other day," and the priest says, "What? Well, so you're here for confession, huh? You're here to do some confessing? No, I'm bragging. Okay, well, get out of church and don't come back until you humble up a little bit." But then the same guy can go back to the priest and say, "I was sleeping with Gertrude." And he goes, "Okay, well, that's good, but why are you telling me?" It's because they're married. So when they were in the first case, they weren't married, and it was lust, and it was selfish, and it did not contribute towards the work of the couple entering into holiness together, which is really the purpose of marriage. The second one is sleeping with his wife. Good. He should sleep with his wife. You probably shouldn't go around bragging about it or telling everybody all over town, but he should be doing that because that contributes towards the godliness. The You have money and not money. So if you got paid all this money for murdering somebody, that's blood money. That's not money. Don't go taking a tithe of that to church. You're not supposed to be taking that to church. You're not supposed to be bringing the best results of your crimes to church. You should go to church, but don't do the murders. You know, that's not money. Money is money that you got honestly, something that you worked for. That is money. I actually, uh, early in the days of web programming, I was like maybe one of the first 10,000 people in the world that knew how to do HTML programming. I was working at Apple Computers and they had a little class. And in those days, it was very simple compared to today. So that's not necessarily a big claim, but I had it. So I was over at a friend's house, and there was a common friend, or a third guy showed up, and he was talking about how he had this big pornography website, and he said he was making all this money, and I could do it too, and he'd even help me. And he's very, very generous in his evil. And I was on pretty hard times, and that was a lot of money, and I knew that I knew how to do it, but I didn't do it because that's not money. It's not. Then you have happiness and non happiness. Happiness that comes, that is basically sinful in nature, always leads to unhappiness. Happiness that comes from God always leads to greater happiness. So in the case of the married guy and the unmarried guy, was he happy before he was married having sex out of wedlock? Sure, he was happy. But it could have also been disastrous in a lot of ways. What if he got her pregnant and she decides to leave him, and now he has all these emotional entanglements, all these other kinds of things? But the sex that he had inside of marriage always contributed to his marriage, and that contributed to his happiness and his godliness. Happiness that comes from God contributes towards your godliness, and that will always contribute towards your contentment and fulfillment. So happiness that's like cotton candy, and it gives you like a little bit of a joy for a moment, it's not very good. It doesn't really give you what you want. So it's not happiness. It just seems like it. And there can be a little bit of confusion there. A little confusion about what you want, what's out of life, what's actually good for you. So you should think about happiness and not happiness. And you should think about what is and what isn't. That's all.
Well, I sure hoped you liked the video. If you did, please like, comment, and share. Tell your friends. This helps spread the word about correct Christian thinking. God bless.